Good evening. How's everybody?
I'm good, but I was going to tell you that Phyllis just sent a text. She's going to be about 30 minutes late. She just got out of a doctor's appointment, but she's on her way home.
All righty. Okay, I think Dr. Laws is going to be late too. He said he ate too many shrimp. He's down at, I think he's at Hilton Head. So I don't know why he's bothering. If I was at Hilton Head, I think I'd find an excuse not to come. Mary just emailed me about your award. Remind me to remind everybody. We're gonna get Stacy. We're gonna try to get her in the Gardner Webb video magazine. Jackie Bridges, hopefully. We'll get her on that. It comes out on Monday morning. The Web, the video magazine. We try to get his. I have somebody pretty much every week, so I have so many of those. But we certainly congratulations. That's a big honor.
They're coming tomorrow to interview me and the two girls who wrote the sweet nomination form and all that stuff. And
Good.
They're going to come in my second block class, that's going to be fun. But I'm kind of excited.
Yeah.
I won one in 2002. So this will be my second one. And that's what the girls said in their little nomination thing. They said she won one in 2002, and we want to let her know that she's still appreciated in 2021. So
Well, that's good. 20 years,
Yeah.
19 years apart. Now, I used to, when we lived in this part of the world, now I still get YYF from Greenville in my Lake Lure place, but obviously we don't pick that up in Charlotte. But I used to watch that. We had a good many from Rutherford County who would get that. They would come across the line in Rutherford, and some of our folks would get it. And then of course in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, we had Joyce Tice and Horace Mann Insurance did the Apple Award there. And it wouldn't make the regular TV, but it would make the local channel 14 sometimes, and the CMS channel. And we used to have our own channel back in CMS, but it's a big deal. It really is. Congratulations to you for that. All right. Well, I've got 6:02. Is anybody ready to lead us off tonight before we got a little lesson to do afterward tonight, so I want us to try to be mindful of our time. So whoever's ready to go, share your screen and let's get rolling. Jennifer says she doesn't have her camera on because her head is wrapped in ice packs. Okay. We hope you're well. And here we go.
I was struggling to unmute myself just then, but I guess we can start.
Okay.
I probably need to go all the way back to the very beginning, though. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? All right, so this is case study 3, and We Are Normal 2 was the name of the scenario that we want. Gosh, I have to keep moving y'all all over the place so I can read. All right, Jimmy and Willie, 2 young men whose friendship has developed into a more intimate relationship, want to attend the prom as a couple. Public displays of affection and the news of the couple's intent to attend the prom together brought out concerns from the students and parents. And I put the Hudsons in parentheses because they were apparently the most vocal. Petitions and condemnation of the abomination caused Mary Lou, the principal, to consider canceling the prom. She visits with the parents of the young men and suggests they speak sense into them and refrain from PDA. At least wait until after graduation to pursue their relationship. The young men want to start a gay straight alliance club at school and institute a day of diversity and a day of silence to increase student awareness and sensitivity to the diverse populations at the school. All right, and we were supposed to answer the questions. Would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? What are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of the Hudsons? And should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? And then there was the question about minimizing bullying and cyberbullying. Well, I don't know if I'm in present mode. I can't see all this stuff. All right. We looked up the definition for veiled threat, and a veiled threat is an indiscreet warning. And I can't see that. It says veiled threats are coded statements in which no explicit intentions are articulated. Yeah, I think we agreed pretty much that it was a veiled threat because she said to speak sense into the young men or wait until after graduation. And this implies their graduation status was at risk if they continued forward with attending the prom as a couple. It also implied they were doing wrong, and we'll see on the other slides, there's tons of things that, that's not wrong, but on the basis, Ann, is this yours?
Yeah, I added that in.
Right, go ahead.
Because
can you see it? Oh, where'd it go? Sorry.
so based on Heckler's veto, you can't sanction one based on the possible actions of others. And as the principal, they can only speak as the principal. So she can't say like, look, I'm trying to just like look out for your best interest. I don't think it's possible for her to step out of the role as principal at all.
Yeah. So right here, you have succinctly and correctly defined the two standards here. The first is Heckler's veto. You can't say, well, I'm not going to let you go to the prom because the other kids might beat you up. That is a threat. That's an implied or a veiled threat. And we can't say, I'm going to take or abridge your rights or take your due process away because these other people are doing the wrong thing. So that's the first standard. The second one is, and I'm glad you caught this one, as principal, you're always principal 24/7. You can't say, if it were me, I would do it is never you. You are always the principal. You always have to remember that. So excellent. You caught both of those points. Moving on.
All right. Let's see. So we did enough with that one. So the next question was, what are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? And we listed all of these things, and Tinker versus Des Moines, and that was in 69. Fickle versus Lynch in 1980, and the general statute 14288.4, and privacy issues discussing students with anyone other than the parent or guardian.
Okay.
So I mean, there was lots of convolutedness and all that. So
all right, so let's work through each of these. Tinker versus Des Moines says you can't punish kids unless you give them due process. And that's a certain amount of disruption is normal in schools. But the big thing from Tinker versus Des Moines is kids get due process rights. Prior to 69, we didn't have due process when I was in school. Prior to then, they just jerked you up if they felt like it, and just kind of like Foghorn Leghorn does in the cartoon with the dog, just wear him out. You didn't have that. The overarching would be the 14th Amendment. Now, again, remembering that public school is not a constitutional right. Public school is provided that states may provide public education in the preamble to the Constitution. It is not in the Bill of Rights, but however, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, equal protection under the law. So that's the standard that applies here. And then the last one there, privacy issues, we'll get to next time. That's under FERPA, FERPA. Federal Education Privacy Act that says that you can't, when these well-meaning people who will come in and say the most awful thing, that they'll qualify their statements with, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a racist, I'm not discriminatory, I'm not and then they will say the most bigoted, racist, discriminatory things in the world about somebody else's child. But you cannot enter into a discussion about somebody else's child. You have to understand that no matter how well-meaning the parents or not well-meaning they are, or no matter how you're trying to calm them down, you can't talk about somebody else's child. You can't tell what punishment you gave them or even if you gave them a punishment. So the standards here are due process, equal protection under the law, and privacy in terms of any kind of educational record. All right, moving along.
Can I ask a question? Tinker versus Des Moines, is that also the one that covers like a reasonable amount of disruption?
Yes, that's exactly it. The kids were protesting Vietnam War, which happened during my era a lot. The kids were protesting the Vietnam. Not only do they get due process, you can't just jerk them up and punish them because you want to, but also says a small amount of disruption is unavoidable in school. That you can't just say, well, you can't protest or you can't do this or that because it might be a disruption. That you can't abridge somebody's rights simply for the idea of quelling any kind of disruption. That doesn't mean that you can take their rights away. That you can't. Basically, schools until that time operated under martial law. Everybody knows what martial law is. That means that we can quell any disturbance we want to. You get no rights. That your rights are suspended and we can take whatever action we want to. School had always been that way for students. They got no rights whatsoever, no due process. They could be punished without getting to give their side of the story. You didn't have to tell them what they were even being punished for.
But we can lay down the law as far as PDA, right?
That's exactly right. And that's how this case hinges as well. The administrator didn't deal with the PDA up front, and that's antecedent behaviors. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. The little things, if you don't address them, the little things become the big thing. And as Lee just pointed out, that means boys and girls, because I can tell you, when you have a school where you have a lot of PDA, it doesn't matter if it's boy, girl, or boy, girl. It doesn't matter. Pretty soon you have sexual harassment and sexual crimes. That's what happens next. It gets worse and worse. If you have gang activity, kids walking around with flags and tattoos and colors and all that, pretty soon you're going to have weapons and serious assault with injury. The little things, if left unchecked, become the big things. That's how antecedent behaviors, the doctrine of antecedent behaviors works. Whether you like it or whether you don't, it's just a fact. And so this started out, and the way it got out of control in the community is they didn't check Jimmy and Willie who were doing PDAs, and that's what got the community inflamed. And so the action that you would take, it's just like I've told you about the young man that I had in high school that wore the dress. As long as he wore a dress that was as long as it was supposed to be, the girls, everything was fine. But the problem is he wore a dress a lot shorter than they were allowed to wear. And that's why I sent him home, was not to change out of the dress, but a dress that was appropriate length like everybody else's. Because I knew if I didn't, the next day I'd have too many girls not being appropriately dressed. And so, yes, PDAs, if it's in your code of conduct, and it is, then you need to act upon that. And you need to due process it just like anything else that you do.
Moving on or not?
Moving on.
All right. The next, well, that was you. Did you add that, Ann?
I did. So
Okay.
also with that, we have the Title IX that also includes the LGBT QI community. And I just included some things that they sent out to the schools about bullying, harassment, and discrimination based on sex stereotypes and assumptions about what it means to be a boy or girl.
Yeah. Okay, in that, you had these parents who came, and these boys were experiencing bullying and harassment. What if a parent is bullying and harassing somebody else's child? Do you have to report that? Of course you do.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, when we go to Power School, and that's why you need to get your APs to show you that. When you go to Power School, and I'll show you in the manual, you have to list the victim type, but you also have to list the perpetrator type. And there's more to that than just students. If parents are bullying, you have to report that child has been bullied. And I would report that to law enforcement as well. Not only would I report it in my state report on the instance in my school, I'd make sure I reported it to the police. Now they can decide what they want to do. That's not our business, what they decide to do with it or don't do with it. But what you don't want to happen is this child, something bad happens to this child, either self-inflicted or somebody else helps, and then or somebody else hurts this child, and then when the investigation comes, you knew that there was somebody that was doing this to this child, and you didn't take any action. You didn't inform the authorities. You didn't report it in your state report on what happened in your school. Ooh, it will not go well for you. That's putting it mildly. You hope you only lose your house. In a case like that, you may lose your freedom too. So let me share. Go ahead. I'll share my screen when we get through. Go ahead.
Okay.
But I will
Okay.
make sure I show you that piece.
Okay. The next question was, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of the Hudsons? First of all, she can't discuss anything about the boys with the Hudsons, period, end of statement. Letter to the community to support all students reciting Title IX. See the big idea, apprehension of a disturbance. The prom thing is, we can't cancel the prom just because they're coming. She should address the student body perhaps. And I thought maybe she should increase security at the prom, perhaps.
Yes, and punish those that perpetrate the crimes, not the victim.
Right. Okay. Should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom? She really can't tell them they can't come, unless there's something outstanding that we don't know about. All student couples will be treated the same and should follow the same school rules. The PDA thing doesn't matter regardless if it's a heterosexual couple or a homosexual couple. And that was the decision on that Frick versus Lynch, that same-sex couples could attend the prom.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Then we talked about bullying and cyberbullying and a plan to minimize that. I looked into South Carolina laws and North Carolina laws about bullying, and I got both of those. And incidents incidents which are perceived as bullying should be reported to law enforcement. Everything has to be reported to law enforcement. Consequences in the first bullet there, consequences for disregarding policies and laws should be clear, and adherence must occur to reinforce the seriousness of the offense. One thing, as far as improving or minimizing the bullying and cyberbullying, was to improve the culture of the school, which reflects inclusivity and acceptance and a zero tolerance for bullying. Maybe professional development and guest speakers, I don't know, but that was just something I threw out. And I can't see that bottom one because y'all are laying on it. Provide learning experiences for teachers and staff as well as students to reinforce the importance of digital citizenship. That's a pretty big deal too. So.
And I would like to add, at my school, a lot of the clubs and even like the student body section have Instagram accounts and advisors over it, but we try to allow the students to run it with guidance so that they're getting the experience about what's appropriate and not. So like we just had a big week where it was our town and it was Mooresville versus Lake Norman, and that got out of control. So like the whole student body had to be sort of reined back in. And I mean, it was a learning experience. And I think, nothing was said it was just about schools in general and what the city said. But doing that, I think the kids, like having them, when they're running a club or whatnot, having and learning from that, it also helps them to see what is right and what is not right as well.
Okay, to Rebecca's point, which is a great one, I've got it on my notes here to talk about tonight briefly. If you're running the school paper, and even if it's digital, or if you're running a school website, or if you're running a school Instagram or Facebook account, you as the faculty advisor do legally have the right to edit that stuff. See, now there's one of the things that I've heard argued is, well, it's the student newspaper or it's the student account, social. It belongs to the school, and you as the advisor do have the right to edit that. You can't let them just put whatever they want. You do have the right. That's not censorship. That's not what that's about. You do have the right because it's used for learning. So you can't. You do have the right to say, no, you can't run that, or you can't say that, or you can't run that article or that stuff. You absolutely, and you must do that. You must make sure that you have a handle on that stuff. But that's always one of the misunderstandings about censorship. If it's a school-based video magazine, Instagram account, Facebook, doesn't matter, or if your school magazine is digital, like the one the newspaper is here at Gardner Webb, you do have the right and you have the responsibility to make sure that only the content that should be there is there. That's number one. Second point, before we go, is about cyberbullying law, and I'm glad Stacy brought that up. For some reason, in every semester, I get at least one student who when they do their discussion board response on cyberbullying, they talk to their school administrator and they believe it when their school administrator says, "Oh, that law was repealed." That is not true. The cyberbullying law was not repealed. One of the sub bullets underneath it was repealed, and let me address that. The cyberbullying law is still intact. What was repealed was the notion that if Mary and I get in a Twitter war and I start losing, I can't claim that I'm being bullied. If I entered into the online discourse with her, and when it gets a little too rough, then I claim she's bullying me. No, if I willingly entered into this discourse with her, and then I start losing, I can't claim I was bullied. That's the only thing that was changed in the law. Otherwise, the cyberbullying law is still on the books. It is a statute. It is the scourge of our time. Cyberbullying has become the biggest disciplinary issue that we have in schools. Just like we started with grading, that's the biggest issue you'll have academically is on grades and grade point average and salutatory and valedictorian, honor societies, participation in clubs, participation in that. All that goes back to grading. That's your biggest academic issue or interior thing. And then the second one is funding and money. And then the third one is cyberbullying. And cases like this with LGBTQ and sexual harassment, all these things, this is the biggest social problem that you have in schools today. And that's why we have it. And next week, we're going to do exceptional children. And that's the biggest of those issues. And so this is something you're going to have to deal with on a daily basis. It's never going to go away. Not in the era of social media. This is going to be a thing all the time. Cyberbullying, bullying, rights, sexual harassment. And again, I'll say it for the 17th time. You got to report this stuff both to the state, but you got to report it to law enforcement. If somebody comes to you and says, this sexual thing is happening to me, you need to involve police, period. Because what happens is if you don't, the police will throw you under the bus. But all of a sudden you get started in an investigation, you're not competent nor qualified to do investigations of a sexual nature. All of a sudden you get started on one that you thought was just a little verbal back and forth, and all of a sudden a physical component pops up, and it's just gone from harassment to assault. What do we do now? We can't undo the investigation we've already started. And the police do not like it when you have started an investigation, questioning people, gathering information, and then when you find, oh, well, this is beyond my scope, my pay grade, oh, police come bail me out. They won't bail you out. Not only will they not bail you out, they'll throw you under the bus, to mix metaphors here. And so my advice, and it's worth what you paid for it. My advice is anything sexual comes in and it appears that it could get sideways, consult your school resource officer. If they say, nah, go ahead, then go ahead. But I would give them the right of first refusal before I got involved in any kind of a sexual investigation of any kind, because you just never know where it's going to lead. I'll give you two examples, then we'll move on to our second group. Welcome, Dr. Laws. I hope you didn't eat too much shrimp.
It was good. And I'm down here toward you. Yep. Right down the street.
Where you at?
Well, we're at Hilton Head now, but I'm
Oh,
coming to Charleston Monday. So we're at Hilton Head right now, and there aren't many shrimp left in the ocean because they're in my belly. And it took too long. So I'm sorry I was late, everybody. And I'm sorry you had Dale by yourself.
I've been kind. Well, I've been kind.
You seem to be kind of tempered so far.
No,
But before we go any further, I got to know, because I get like 3 of you on my screen. Rebecca, what are you eating? What's for supper?
Oh, I was just snacking on Cheez-Its.
Oh gosh. Well, my supper was better than that, I will tell you. Okay.
All right. So two quick stories. Both of these are from Mecklenburg County. One's from my time and one's from right after my time. During my time, we had a fellow who had been principal and had been promoted to the central office. They sent him out to do an interim at North Mech. An investigation, a girl came in who was 16, reported that she had been sexually assaulted. They didn't bother to tell the police. And now remember, it's important that in North Mecklenburg is in the city limits of Huntersville. Their campus is actually the southern limit of the city limits of Huntersville. So their school resource officer is a Huntersville policeman. They didn't bother to tell the policeman and conducted an investigation and said, well, she's 16 years old. No assault occurred, except they forgot to read the manual, which I'm going to pull up here for you. They forgot to read the manual, and the manual says that the age of consent in North, and it's the same in South Carolina, is 16 unless you're self-contained EC. If you are mentally or physically incapable of consenting, there is no age limit for consent. She was self-contained EC, what we would call back in the day EMH. She couldn't consent, and so the parent went to the police, and the Huntersville police chief got on the Charlotte station and said, we're quite sure a crime occurred, but we have no way to know because the school contaminated all the evidence. And, Mike was a good fellow, long-time principal, but he had to go home. That's what happens when things like that happen. He had to go home. We had one at Butler where the entire administrative staff, all the way down to the secretary, had to go home because it was easier for them to cover up a sexual assault because they had covered up the first two that weren't as bad as when the third one came, same boy, but a independent witness, a contractor on campus saw it. They tried their best. They suspended the girl. And they tried their best to cover it up. And so in the end, the principal, 3 APs, and the data manager, who all conspired to cover up this, star football player. But he went on to Georgia, and I don't think he ever saw the field. He got arrested. He was in a credit card and check kiting scheme down there before he ever even saw the field. But they intentionally did that. The one at North Mech was they just didn't want it to be bad PR. It was just easier to do it themselves. And then the one that happened right after my time, thankfully I had trained the AP who saw a kid with a phone. They were passing the phone around. He got the phone and he saw something on the phone that gave him pause. And so he took the phone and reported it to the school resource officer. They got the phone opened up and found out that an 18-year-old boy at Huff High School was having these young girls over at Bailey Middle School next door send them, inappropriate pictures. And then he was blackmailing them to have sex with him over the pictures. It was really, really bad. He got multiple years in the penitentiary. But instead of just ignoring it, the person said, this is beyond my scope. Let me go to the police. And they were able, through a power of a subpoena, to find the actual pictures. And so always involve the police up front. If you do that, even if you're not a bad person, or if you're trying to do bad things, involve them. Now, obviously, if you're trying to cover something up, you don't want to get the police involved, but always do that. And so let me show you this right quick.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
We had an incident, like sort of, with Abby. He wasn't a teacher, but he was like an assistant coach at one of the middle schools, just to walk on, whatever. Anywho, it said inappropriate took pictures to my child.
Yeah.
And anyway, long and short of that, the girls were laughing about it in class. One of the teachers overheard them laughing and reported it, which was fine. She called me and told me she was. But the principal asked me if I wanted to pursue anything with law enforcement. So apparently he never went to law enforcement, did he?
No.
And
he was hoping you'd say no so he wouldn't have to.
Yeah. Shouldn't he have done that first before he even contacted me?
That is the law.
My mama just said, let's sue him. No, I didn't really want a big deal made up. They let the guy go, but long and short of, I just wanted to know if he should have known better than to ask me if I wanted to pursue.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. So.
All right. And so, as I said, in the disciplinary data reporting manual, and that's a good point, is that a lot of times, in order to try to avoid negative public scrutiny or negative publicity, we'll try to skirt around the laws and do it quietly, handle it in-house. There is no handling this kind of stuff in-house. The appropriate thing to do was to report that to the police. And here's the downside of that. You, as the parent, anytime within 90 days of that happening, could have gone to a magistrate anywhere in North and South Carolina. You could have gone to the magistrate yourself and pressed charges. And then how would they have looked? You talking about egg? That's why they were wanting to know if you were going to pursue this, because all of a sudden this thing shows up on a court docket somewhere. The media gets a hold of it, and there's not a report from the school. So that should have been reported. It says right here, if the person assaulted is mentally disabled, mentally incapacitated, and physically helpless, then they cannot consent at 16 years of age. And so that's the deal here. And then we even have, the age matters on these things. And so the notion that we could have somebody 16 or over who could consent, but it's still a crime. Especially in the case we're talking about, if that person is mentally incapacitated, they don't have the right to consent. They can't consent. And so here is your disciplinary data reporting manual. You can download this from DPI. And as I told you before, consequences, we report actions. We don't report outcomes. An action is we had a fight. You can't say, well, I didn't suspend them, so I don't have to report it. No, the state does not mandate a consequence. That's the local code of conduct that does that. It just has to say what happened. You have to report the victim type, and you also have to report the perpetrator type, and that might be a parent. And here are all the consequence types, but it says these are violations of the code. These are reportable incidents here. And some of them have UB, which is unacceptable behavior, but the ones that PD, that's persistently dangerous, that'll count against you as a potentially dangerous school. And that's why people don't want to report them, because you get the same trouble as a low performing academic school. And if it says RO, that means you have to tell the police no matter what. You have to tell the police. PDs, you have to tell the police. Now, the ROs, you have to tell that's a reportable offense, but you don't have to count it against yourself in your calculation for a persistently dangerous school. Only the PDs. But there's penalty. People say, well, why don't these people want to report? Because there's a penalty for reporting. I mean, it's kind of like an IQ test. You punish yourself, but you're supposed to be an ethical person and do that. If these things happen on your campus, you're supposed to report them to law enforcement, and you're supposed to put all these incidents in your Power School, in your disciplinary data module in Power School. You're required by law to do that. You say, well, if I don't do it, they're going to fire me. Well, what happens if you get declared a persistently dangerous school? What happens to you? You get fired anyway. They reconstitute your school. Nobody's going to move kids. We tried that in Charlotte-Mecklenburg 30 years ago, and that turned out to be just an absolute disaster. So Cochran got declared persistently dangerous, was an inner city junior high school converted to a middle school, but during that time. And somebody got to the parents there and said, you should want to go down to Ballantyne. They just opened J. Robinson down at Ballantyne. And that was a 2-hour bus ride for those kids both ways. But when they got down there, you talking about just Tracy was the principal. They just went crazy. All those kids from, bad chaps from Cochran come in on top of, all those well-to-do white kids from Ballantyne. Oh, it was terrible. That was the one, we were one and done on that. After that, if somebody got declared persistently dangerous, we just reconstituted the school. What that means is you make all the teachers reapply for their job and you fire all the administrators. That's what happens if you become, and that's under No Child Left Behind from 91. It says your child doesn't have to go to a low performing academic school, don't have to go to a persistently dangerous school. We have 16 now, there was 17, now it's 16 acts of crime and violence. All of those, the acts of crime don't count against you, the acts of violence do. And those are the ones that are labeled PD in that manual that the state puts out. Those are the ones that count against you. And it's 1 for every 200 or half of 1%. And so we used to say it's 5 for every 1,000, but I seriously had school administrators that were dumb enough to think, well, we don't have 1,000 kids, so that doesn't apply to us. No, it's a percentage. It's not an absolute number, They make you ride the short bus to school, dumb as you are. But that's the threshold. If you have more than that, and that's why you've got to be concerned with the little things, because they have a direct link. The conference presentation that I have in there, let me share my screen, and because it's mine, I won't spend much time on it. This is one I did for the state conference. I was the keynote in 2011. I was out the door, and so, but unfortunately, I was the state expert because I had the most incidents in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. But antecedent behaviors. We know this is from 10 years ago, folks. Gang activity, cyberbullying. We knew then that this was on these were going to be This was going to be the future of schooling. This is what was going to happen. This is 10 going on 11 years old. But we know that if you have gang activity, you'll have weapons, you'll have drugs, you'll have violent assaults, bullying, sexting, sexual harassment. If you have phones and bullying, you're going to have these. If you have sexual harassment, it'll become sex crimes. These are the antecedent things that become the much bigger. Bullying, cyberbullying leads to assaults, leads to suicides. Sexting, sexual harassment, this kind of stuff leads to all your sex crimes. The little things become the big things. And so if you want to learn all about this, this is a comprehensive, now it's a long presentation, but it is comprehensive. All the legal work is done for you here. It explains all about persistently dangerous from the federal statute, from No Child Left Behind, which was 20 years old at that time. It has what the acts of violence that count against you. Here they are, all the things that you need to know. You need to understand that the little things will become the big things in your school, and it'll get away from you. It's just that simple. It will get away from you. People say, well, I can't just stop these one-off things. I mean, they just happen at random. No, they don't happen at random. They don't. I can look at a school's data. If they put it in accurately, if they put it in Power School accurately, I can look at a school's data and tell you where the next violent crime will be. It's just that simple, folks. It's that linear. And so when you let the little things go, you let the sexting, you let the bullying, the social media stuff get out of hand, you'll have assaults, you'll have the sexual crimes, you'll have violent acts. You let gangs get out of control, even if they're just little local gangs, and that's in that presentation. It doesn't have to be the Bloods and the Crips. It can be just little local gangs. If you let that get out of control, you'll have weapons, violent assault, and drugs in your school if you let that stuff get out of control. Even if it is just, a local little community gang. It doesn't matter. That's what they are. That's who they are. And so you should spend some time with that presentation. All right, I'm going to pause questions that you have on anything we've covered so far, and then if you don't, we're going to let Dr. Steve weigh in.
I had a little bit of a question. What if that dangerous thing you were talking about? Do you find that a lot of times maybe they do report it, but they report it as a lesser offense somehow?
They underreport it. Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm just trying to think of ways you could skirt around that, but I mean, you're still going to get in trouble, I'm sure. But
if you get caught now
yeah.
in that manual, that's a great point, Stacy. In that manual I just showed you, it speaks to that how you got to report stuff so that you don't hide the big stuff underneath the little stuff, or you don't classify it as less than it actually is. But now there's a natural buyer's remorse. Once you get the kids separated, they've poked you a time or two, or maybe tore the pocket off your shirt, or pulled your necktie, or done whatever, or like me, you come up, I've got scars under both of my cheeks from breaking up stuff. But you caught your breath, the adrenaline has settled down, you've got the blood up out of the floor, you've gone home for the weekend, and on Monday, all of a sudden, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. That's kind of a natural thing that you have to, and that's why the state says 24-48. So that there's less of that to happen. What does that mean? It means that if it's a reportable incident, you've got to report it to the state within 24 hours. If it's all other incidents, within 48 hours, so that you can't, get to thinking about, well, what if I report this? This is going to be worse on me than it is on them. You got to get it in there. You can't wait until cooler heads prevail, 2 or 3 down the, when the news media has left and things have settled down and you've gotten off the news cycle, and all of a sudden it ain't near as bad as you remember it being, or maybe it wasn't that bad. You start that dissembling, that you do in your mind. you were on the news cycle for three new, the morning, the noon, and the early afternoon, but you weren't on at 11 o'clock that night. And so, you finally breathe a little sigh of relief. You got off the news cycle, and we've got the blood up out of the floor, and your own black eye is now, the swelling's gone down. And so you start thinking, well, maybe that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Well, that's the first thing you have to combat. But yes, we have people who intentionally try to underreport or hide one incident under another. And so the manual, let me show you that quickly. Let me share my screen again. The manual actually speaks to that, how you have to report these things. Let me go back. And it has scenarios for you so that somebody is supposed to train you in your district how to do this, but it has how you report it. But there's also reporting assaults right here, reporting behaviors, examples. It gives you all those so that you will report them as fully as they are supposed to be. And it goes through this. But you are supposed to, I even made my own manual. I've got a copy of it in here. Right here, see this one says right here. So when I trained people, or I had folks who trained people, we did the NCYs was right before Power School. It became Power School. As you can see, my name's here on it right here per me. So this was the training manual that I had written by a professional group. And you can see on the screens, these look like Power School screens. And I actually did a training on how I wanted it done. So there was no excuse for reporting incorrectly or underreporting or any of those things. So every administrator that we hired in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, either I trained them directly myself, or since I was the person responsible, or I had this training group until I had them. They would get the new ones, and then when they got the jobs, when they moved in, into the higher level jobs, I trained them more individually, went out to their schools and would work with them. This has got to stop. We're seeing this data, we're seeing that. Let me do that now. And that was part of the notion of, we can't allow you to continue to put the district in harm's way, especially kids in harm's way and faculty members, but even the district in financial harm's way over you doing this wrong. Now, full disclosure, I've told the story on myself. One of the reasons I decided to retire and move on when it was my time was I had a fellow who I was letting go, a principal he was in the 5-day period between when I had notified him that I was terminating him and when he was to come in and say, yes, I'm going to fight it and go due process, or I'll accept it, or his three choices. He killed himself. He committed suicide during that interim 5 days. That's a hard thing, folks. But he had a kid. He'd been told, and he had a kid who brought a gun and discharged it at a school event, and he hid it and didn't tell it and let the gun get off campus. Do you know the kind of liability that brings about if that gun shoots somebody else in the community? But now it wasn't his first time. He'd been told. I'd trained him. I'd trained his 2 APs. They'd been told, numerous times, you got to quit this. And to the point when finally the kid brought the gun to the school event and actually discharged it at the school event, and he didn't report it. And we found out quite incidentally, people calling 911, he had to go. But he felt the need to cover it up. That's just who he was. Now, unfortunately, as time goes by and things happen, one of the APs that was there during that time that was underreporting, eventually he was the one that was principal at Myers Park that recently got relieved for covering up things at Myers Park some 20 years later, nearly 20 years later. These things kind of become interrelated, I guess. Let's see when that was, when he killed him 2 times ago. It was 12 years later. 12 years later. he had to be relieved of his job for covering up sexual things at Myers Park. And so I'd like to tell you that people will do the right thing always. When their own self-interest is involved, they won't. And you know, and so the notion here is ethical people, you've got to do, it's better to take your lumps up front. My argument is it's better to take your lumps up front. You'll eventually get found out, and then it'll be too late then. And then there can be not only civil, but some criminal that comes along with this. And so you need to make sure that you read that manual and know what you're required to report, and law enforcement, get everybody involved, and don't just try to say, well, oh, it'll be a bad PR for our school. That will never go well for you. I'll just tell you, it won't. Steve?
Okay, so I've listened to all your negative stuff here, Dale. There are a couple things. One is that we, and Dale's spot on with all of this, by the way. First of all, we as school people are very concerned about the image of our school. And that, you know, it's to me, in most cases, it is not the principal or the administration trying to cover something up or make it less than what it was for their own benefit. Rather, it is for the benefit of the school that they represent. That we just don't want that image of our school. So that's the first thing. The second thing is how simple it is indeed to involve law enforcement. They're there. Every one of you in your particular role right now can almost, if we went to all of you one by one and said, how long would it take you to get response from law enforcement if you had an issue? Every one of you would have this very small time frame. Even if one wasn't located on your campus, the time frame would be very small. It is not hard to involve them. And in fact, to be able to pass along the issue to law enforcement relieves you of so much of the burden that it's worth your while to do, if for no other reason. And obviously, from what Dale has shared, what you have shared in this case, it is better to do it for all of those reasons. The third is the most profound, and I wondered when it would come up, and Dale kind of, and he's led up to this, and the old adage of that is biblical in nature, but real in life, whether we follow the biblical teachings or not, and that is, your sins will find you out. And so I'm reminded when I see this case, when I hear your discussion, the news that has been prominent in the last year to 18 months of our gymnastics teams, the women's gymnastics team that have been involved with the quote medical personnel, the Michigan State women's athletics program, who have been involved with the medical personnel there that did such terrible things. And you know, and administration either was oblivious or covered it up, and most of us probably would err on the latter than the former. And now it's prominent. And these entities that tried to do things in a different fashion than simply involving law enforcement from the time it was reported, now are, you know, I mean, their credibility is shot, but it's worse than the credibility. It is, they have ruined lives of young people. And so the short-term pain is worth everything else that we would do. And that's why you do it. The last thing I would say is this. Entities create reputations based on how they handle things. If the reputation is we do something wrong that is illegal, it will be reported to law enforcement. That gets out to students and to community. If reputation is they're going to try to fix it within house to protect their own image, then you will find more and more that students and adults will be bolder and bolder in doing things that are wrong. So all of this comes into play. And I think that I think it's a great case study. I think all of you are, I know all of you are ethically compassed to make sure that you protect your young people and your adults at your school. And I don't think that always the people who try to cover it up, if you will, are necessarily evil people. They were just miscompassed. They thought the image of the school was more important than the protection of the people involved. And our number one role is to protect. And that's what you expect as faculty members. That's what you expect for your children, your own personal children, and the children that you work with. And that's what we need to do. That's my sermon for now.
Absolutely. The right thing is always the right thing. And to kind of conclude before we go to our second presentation, I would encourage you not to follow up and read this one that I'm going to tell you about. That is within this one has been in the last 2 weeks. It's not school, it's athletics again. The National Hockey League. There are so many different facets to it. It's 11 years old, but it has come to light in the last 2 weeks. And everybody involved has lost their jobs. Even they don't even work for the Chicago Blackhawks anymore. Some of them are scattered to different teams around the league. They've all lost their jobs, but some of these people are very, financially they're going to be ruined. They'll never work again. But some of them may end up in prison. But again, it was about some young hockey players, young ones. A lot of these professional hockey teams, they draft kids and the juniors, and they're 16 years of age. And it's a really sad story, but your sins will find you out. It'll eventually come to light. And again, it's a case of just like the Michigan State and the gymnastics, young people were being taken advantage of by adults, were being preyed upon. And it was easier for the organization to cover it up than to do the right thing, unfortunately. And so we are a Christian university, and I guess what we're saying is we expect you to do more than just the normal. We want you to be ethical and moral, and we want your to be servant leaders and to be to be Christians in thought and deed. And protecting children should be your number one. Always protecting children. Just like back to our first case study. We know that sometimes kids that need love the most deserve it the least, like Bobby in our first case. But we can't allow adults or anybody else to take advantage or to be predatory against kids in any way. That's just a no-no in our business. Number one, we always got to protect kids. All right, we're ready for our second presentation of the evening. Our time is going well.
All right, so don't necessarily need to summarize, but just to remind, you've got Jimmy and Willie who were together. The principal was contacted by parents. She spoke to the boys. Then she got another message from parents who were ready to boycott, and they had gotten a petition and they were very upset about it. Students wanted the prom canceled. After that, she met with the boys again and basically told them to cut it out, or there's potential risk in it for them. Asked them to wait to graduation to resume their relationship. Jimmy and Willie's parents got fired up about it and said she'd basically threatened and infringed upon their First Amendment rights. And now, as a result of all of this, they want that day of diversity, day of silence, and the Gay Straight Alliance Club before graduation. So yeah, we're going to get right into the analysis of the case. So, Elizabeth?
Yep. So we basically agreed with the last group. Would you consider Mary Lou's comment a veiled threat? Yes, because she said that their actions could bring about danger. And then she was putting like graduation on the line and telling him to wait till the end of the month. What are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? Well, if she's not familiar with all of the law, then she should consult legal counsel first. Needs to remember that equal treatment for all students. We spoke already about Tinker versus Des Moines and free speech, and then Title IX. Next slide. So how should she respond? We talked about she provides a listening ear. She can't really speak about the other student. And then student speech can't be suppressed for the sole reason someone may be offended or create an outburst in response to the speech. And I think that goes with heckler's veto. And then remind them of their rights as parents. And should she allow them to attend the prom as a couple? Yes. And she needs to remind students, not just the boys, but the other students who are protesting and saying they're not going to go to the dance. They have free will and equal protection under the law. And other students can decide and have the freedom to either go or not go to the dance as well. And then we talked about Frick versus Lynch in 1980.
So we did a little bit of kind of just conversation around policies regarding bullying and cyberbullying. And in Pitt County Superior Court, they ruled in favor of a mother, and I believe this was recently, who alleged that her children were denied the right of a sound basic education due to bullying within the school. Administration, there are a couple of cases, Kowalski versus Berkeley County Schools and Doninger versus Niehoff in 2008, that dealt with the social media internet issues. And one of the things that our group really talked about is, in a lot of the districts, in order for it to be considered bullying, there has to be multiple offenses. It can't just be a one-time shot. And so we discussed the fact that documentation is extremely important in terms of keeping track of when instances are occurring. And we also talked about the fact that when things occur outside of school, when it spills over into school, it becomes a distraction in the building. And that's another issue that has to be dealt with. So we made the point just to be sure to check the district policy because it may vary in terms of the steps to handle it. And we also talked about the fact that principals cannot talk to anyone other than Jimmy and Willie in terms of their parents, in terms of what's happening with them and how they're going to proceed with it.
Okay, so our the legal and ethical issues, students' free speech is protected as long as they don't present a clear and present danger or cause a disruption. And we have those cases there. And then that the courts have also ruled in favor of students when administration tried to discipline them for, internet and social media on and off campus. So again, with that, making sure that there's documentation when incidents are occurring, because even if it's off campus, if there is repeated offenses or if it spills over into the schools, that'll come into play again. Equal Access Act, schools will not receive federal funding if they infringe upon students' First Amendment rights. And then for our ethical, it wasn't her place to tell the parents to speak sense to their children. Not her place to give her personal opinion and her thoughts. So she needed to kind of, stay out of that part. next one. Okay, so for the justice, the principal is not being equitable, being arbitrary and capricious, policy on the PDA at the school. For this one, different different schools might have a policy with PDA, so that would be a whole separate issue just to, because of the PDA that was addressed in the case itself. And with critique corrupt morals, human rights issues, showed extreme bias and personal beliefs. We have to make sure that we're treating all of the students equitably as much as possible. So even if we believe one thing and they're showing something different, we can't show that when we are addressing an issue. And the principal was not showing nurture and care or compassion towards Jimmy and Willie. Needed to listen more than talk a little bit, I guess. And for the profession, what is in the best interest of the students, did not safeguard the equity, again, not promoting social justice for all students.
Okay. I want to follow up on some things. I want a couple of points here. In terms of a pattern, most of the time when you are considering discipline for a child, you're supposed to, part of the due process is you're only supposed to consider that action. There's a couple of caveats here. In bullying, you can show a pattern. In bullying and sexual offenses, you can show a pattern on both of those. It's repeated. So you can bring that to bear when you're doing the judgment of the consequence for a child. That's the only two times when you can bring previous incidents into when you pass down the judgment on the child. You did it or you didn't. You're guilty. This is the consequence I'm assigning. If it's bullying, a pattern is relevant there, and sexual misconduct pattern is relevant there. Otherwise, you can only punish the kid for the incident that they did. But those two, you can punish them for a pattern of incidents. So make sure you understand that. So if a kid has fought, as crazy as it sounds, if a kid's fought 14 times and he's fought it the 15th time, you can only punish him for 15 for that fight, not the first 14. But if you can show a pattern on bullying or sexual misconduct, then that can be factored into, so they get more punishment than that one incident would allow for. So remember that. We got to be careful of remember our standards of arbitrary and capricious. We can't give more punishment than the law allows for a particular incident unless it's bullying or sexual misconduct. Those two we can. All right, so we just need to remember those two. And then in terms of cyberbullying, I get this notion of, well, we don't have to handle that because we don't know where it occurred. If it disrupts your school, you have to deal with it. Doesn't matter whose machine it was they sent it from. And he doesn't have a phone. My child doesn't have a phone, but he borrowed somebody else's. Well, but that wasn't, doesn't matter. If it causes a disruption in your school, you are by law required to deal with it. I got a call on my walkie, high school principal. I got a call on my walkie one day, and my secretary, Mickey, said, there's 2 treasury agents here to see you. And I thought, what in the world is a treasury agent? So I got there, and I didn't know it. Maybe I did. I just didn't remember, probably, that the Secret Service is part of the Treasury. And so I had 2 Secret Service agents waiting on me when I got to my office. This was during the Clinton administration, and one of the students and one of our students had sent a death threat to the First Lady Hillary Clinton using one of our computers. Back in the early days of computing, when there wasn't any way to hide or IPO or any of that, he just sent it. Didn't know that they could just trace it right back to him and his account at school. So that was my first case. I was on the cutting edge of cyberbullying here, cyber threats. But trust me, if kids do things like that, if they do something against the government, they take those kinds. They don't have any sense of humor. By the way, I think they hire those guys based on lack of sense of humor, or if they have any, they surgically remove it. They don't think stuff like that's funny at all. And you shouldn't either. I mean, I use that as an example of, this is serious business. These threats have a way of materializing. These things tend to and even if they don't, We've seen so many, unfortunately. It just breaks my heart how many kids we've seen commit suicide. These things have a tendency to get away from you. And so this notion that I can stick my head in the sand and claim I don't know who sent it, or it wasn't sent from school, or it wasn't sent during school hours, that's a cop out, folks. You got to be better than that. You got to follow through and do the things you need to. So what I wanted to follow up on this one, and was intentionally waiting for this one, is what about this notion of a day of diversity, a gay straight alliance, or a club? Let's talk about those, and let's take them one at a time. Give me your thoughts on day of diversity.
I like it. I don't know if that was posed to a specific group, but I like a day of diversity. And I mean, it was just last week that everybody in South Carolina, or maybe it was national, wore yellow or orange, just against bullying. I mean, I think a day of diversity is similar to a day against bullying, where everybody can wear a certain color to say, hey, I want to be part of this movement, and I am also against bullying. I think it's good. I think it also reminds kids that we don't have to always believe what our parents believe. And I think that's a part of this whole issue, is that in schools, it's hard to teach kids. You don't have to believe what your parents believe. But the bottom line is, we need our students to understand that they don't have to believe what their parents believe, especially as high school students.
What about allowing students to start a gay straight alliance? What about that? Something that's a little more controversial than day of diversity, and then starting a school club is even more controversial than that. What do you think about those?
I know for ours, we have to have a faculty sponsor before any club is able to actually be formed, because you have to have that supervision so that the students don't go too far, or it creates where it's going to be spillover into the school or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. Superintendent Steve. You've got you've got your belly full of shrimp now, and you're sitting there as the superintendent tonight. If these things popped up at one of the high schools where you were superintendent, what would you want the process to be?
Well, first of all, when you go back to this case study and you see that these calls for clubs to form and diversity days to form and be held, it oftentimes, as we see in society, is a result of we sticking our heads in the sand and saying we're going to do things the way we've always done. And I think that's what Ann was alluding to. And so it then takes on a bigger picture, I guess, because then you have the movement, if you will, to have this and this and this and this, rather than a kind of an evolution to take care of these things where there's a trust between the adults who have been at the school and the young people who are now at the school. And you can kind of form these things that it almost takes on less of a controversial nature and more of a community nature. And so these things came about as a result of our failure to deal with things properly the first time through. And so that would be my first thought as a superintendent of how did we get to this point, and understand that it's because we haven't been addressing these things as we proceeded. Now, going further, as a superintendent or as a or school-based administrator. We are, again, going back to this being cognizant of our image. We know that I mean, if we look at society as it is today, if the gay straight alliance is formed at our school, if we have any kind of club that addresses these kinds of things, there's going to be a pushback from a significant portion of our community, and we just have to be able to address that with the law. And that's, you know, listen, when Dale and I were administrators over a decade ago, the bigger push, rather than this, you know, the homosexual, heterosexual thing, the bigger issue was the Latino population and offering, you know, opportunities for them within our public schools, the ESL piece, if you will. And there's this huge pushback, and Dale will remember this. Well, why are we teaching them? Everybody ought to be able to speak American. You know, that's what they would say in Gaston County and Wilkes County. Speak American. And you know, it would frustrate the hound out of you, but when you would look at a parent and say, you know, it doesn't really matter what I think, and it really doesn't matter what you think. The law says we're going to do this. And if you don't want to live by the law, then that's your business, but I'm going to. And so that's really what Dale, I think, is getting at with this whole notion of we can have clubs and organizations that we don't particularly I guess want from the standpoint of image in some of our communities, but the law says they can happen, and we are charged to uphold the law, and that's as simple as we can put it. Dale, am I wrong on that?
No, you're exactly right, and that's the whole point. These things are highly controversial. You know, I actually had a student, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, said, I don't know why you're including this one. We've already, you know, we're past this. I said, I don't think so. I don't believe we are. This is still a hot button issue, and Steve is right. The hottest button issue when I was in Burke County as principal was the Hmong population moving in from the, you know, refugees from Vietnam War, and ESL. When I got to Charlotte, the biggest issue there, ESL and the Latino population on the east side of town. You know, it had shifted from that. Again, well, these people need to learn to speak American. Why can't they assimilate and all these kinds of things? But the law was the law. We did the right thing. And now that has been usurped by the LGBTQ questioning community. And we're going to do the right thing. If they can get a faculty sponsor, they can have a club. If they apply and the district approves it, they can have a day of diversity. I mean, all these are within their. So the notion here is regardless of your personal feelings, as long as they follow the law and the law says that they can do these things, then it's your job to facilitate that. You know, one of the things that we've seen is well, they have the right to, but if I don't help them, or if I don't support or facilitate it, it won't happen. Your job is to support and facilitate it. If the law says they can have it, then you need to make sure it gets done. You know, you can't pick and choose what you like or what you won't facilitate. And you know what I mean administratively. You can make things happen or not happen, you know. But you got to be careful to keep your finger off the scale here, whatever metaphor you want to use. You got to be careful to do that. If you know, if you have a group, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes comes and wants to form a club on your campus, then they get to do that. And so we have to do that. And so the question is, does the district or superintendent have to approve all new clubs? No. That's a school level decision. That is a school level decision. And whatever your criteria, your charter for clubs in your district is at your school, that's what they get to do. And if they can come up with a faculty sponsor, they can have they can have a club. Now they can't just have it on their own, but if they can get a faculty sponsor. Now, should you make somebody be their faculty sponsor is the next question I always get asked. Somebody's going to put that in here. Should you, in order to be fair, should you make somebody be their sponsor? That's the question I'm posing for you folks right now. If you're the school principal, should you assign that as somebody's duty?
I mean, I don't know if you can or not, because I don't know what the law says, but I would.
Any other duties assigned by the principal?
Yeah,
That's what
I hate that part. But I think that would be a bad thing to do as an administrator, because what are you going to get the most how are you going to choose who you pick for that? I don't know. I mean, because you don't know people's personal beliefs, and you may not want, even if they're not openly not racist, biased or whatever against straight gays or whatever. Even if they're not openly, they may have some sort of hidden agenda. I just think that'd be a dangerous thing to do.
Mary?
I mean, in the role of the principal, they have the right to assign duties. We take volunteers. I've never had a principal assign a club duty. Now we get assigned morning and lunch duty.
Yeah.
But never a club or a sponsorship duty. But it could happen.
Our principal assigned student council to 2 beginning year teachers in their second year.
So then my question is if something is against someone's religious or personal beliefs, like what Leah had mentioned in the chat, then does the teacher have the right to refuse that duty?
No. No.
Can I refuse the duty if it's after my required work hours?
Yeah, if it's after your required work hours, you can.
So then, and for us, that would be a yes, because all of our clubs are after school hours.
But now that's not past your duty time. Remember, you don't punch a clock as a teacher. If it's standard practice at your school to do clubs after hours, then that's still part of your work day. That's still part of your work day.
Even if clubs are optional?
Even if they're optional, any duties assigned by the principal, there's no time clock. You don't do 37.5 hours like teacher assistants. You could be assigned to do that. My question is should you assign to do that? Yeah, the principal legally can assign you to do that. My question is should you as principal assign that duty to somebody, or should it be like what we generally do is we tell the students that it's your responsibility. These clubs are all about leadership, aren't they? Yours and taking responsibility. Your responsibility is to find somebody who will do this. Now the question arises, should we go far enough to ensure equal access for everybody? Should we go far enough to assign duties? And at this point, you can as a principal. I don't think it's a good idea, but legally you could. But whatever your current process for identifying those people is, and generally it's the students have to find a sponsor to start a new club. But then what happens if they start a club and that sponsor takes a job elsewhere? What do you do then? These are difficult questions. Legally, again, the principal can assign that to somebody.
Can I just, this is maybe not relevant, but my principal is a male, and he is openly a gay individual. And he started at our school at the end of last year. So he hasn't even been there a year yet. But it is an alternative school, and we work with a, pretty straightforward group of kids. And, I've heard him called a faggot more times than I can count. And it just gives me chills up my spine. And I, of course I ask the students, like, why would you say that? What does that bring for you to call him that? And it's just, it's interesting. That's the only thing I had to say. It's just an interesting dynamic.
Yes, it is. This is a tough one. You might have to find somebody on your faculty that, you could have some critical conversations with people. At this point, I would not assign it. I just think that it's too highly sensitive. There's too much backlash. But legally you could. Legally you could do that, but just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And but I certainly would not want to stop kids from having this, but I don't want to put a faculty member in a position where they're, that I might be running them off or putting them in harm's way as well. I mean, that they've got to want to do this. This is not like signing the beta club. This is very, this is a much bigger social construct than who's going to be the sponsor for the beta club or the key club. But these are things that you're going to have to figure out, because it's not going to go away. And these folks are not going, that sounds pejorative, doesn't it? These folks, they're not going to change just because you don't like them or because you want them to. These are issues that you're going to have to deal with in schooling. But I think that if you ask, that would be the thing to do, is if you ask, if you have the students have got to find somebody to begin with, and they've got to ask. But if you get in a situation where they lose their sponsor and you got to try to help them and facilitate them, I think then it's incumbent upon you to ask. But if you don't have anybody, you don't have anybody. I hesitate on that. I'm gonna make you do this. That can go wrong in so many ways. It can be actually harmful. And if you lose your sponsor, you lose your sponsor. And although I might think it's a good thing to have, I just can't. I just don't think it's a good idea to put faculty in that kind of harm's way. Dr. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I think you and I both have experience with this, and all of our 10 in the cohort have experienced this as well. If I'm the principal and I need someone to sponsor a club, I'm going to ask them if they'll consider that. But to make somebody, Dale is exactly right. You can assign whatever, but you better have your ducks in a row, because then, if I'm the faculty that does not want to do that, then the next question is, why did you pick me and only me? And I better have a good answer for that, because it's I may get by with that argument if looking at my screen here, if Ann is the only faculty member who does not have a club responsibility, I may can say, well, Ann, you don't have any other club, and I'm trying to be fair to everybody. Otherwise, I better have a good explanation that Ann is the only qualified person to handle this club, and that typically is not the case in a school setting. So typically, as you know, all of you principals, they have authority, but they have to be smart about it, and you will be. And this really doesn't come into play very often. I think it does come, those of you who are in secondary schools in particular are very cognizant that the protocol is that if a student organization, student group wants to form a club, they find the sponsor. And if they don't find the sponsor, they'll come to the principal and say, will you find us a sponsor? And if the principal's smart, they'll say, no, protocol is you find the sponsor.
That is correct.
And that's how it's handled. And
That is the way. But the juxtaposition of tonight's case study is on the discipline side, you got to know what's important and what you're going to, the hill you're going to die on. That we're going to report things, we're going to report them accurately. We're not going to try to hide and cover up bad things. And on the other side is we're going to use discretion, even though we can, we know we've got to use discretion. And that's the juxtaposition. You got to know, you've got to be firm in your ethical foundation, your moral center. You've got to be firm in that, this matters. This needs to be addressed. And on the other hand, that's not the right way. You got to understand that power dynamic. And that's really the takeaway from this case study is that to know when you've got to be proactive and do something. But on the other hand, you got to know when just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's very difficult. That power dynamic, you could sit here and listen to me flap my gums till you're as old as I am. The only way to learn that is on the job. But it's one of those things that you have to learn. You have to learn what I've got to go be a hard charger on. This can't happen in this building. And on the other end, you've got to learn to pull that power back. That's what's difficult. This case appears simple, but that's the thought-provoking piece of this case is when do I go to the mat and when do I hold back? I've got to know when each is appropriate and when each is the right thing to do. That application of power. As Steve said early on in this class, principal has more power than anybody else in the district, more than the superintendent. Has more power on a day-to-day basis. And that's what you've got to learn to do is how to apply that power equitably and intelligently. And compassionately. That's the whole notion here. That's what we do. All right. The only other thing I've got on my list for tonight, we've got some really good, not just because I pulled them, there's some really good things under tonight's lesson in terms of disciplinary data manual, looking at your code of conduct, how to report. Remember, the state just says you have to report. They don't tell you what consequences you have to give. Your local district through the code of conduct tells you if you do this, you get that. The state just says you must tell us if these things happen. These are bad things. They should not happen in your school. If they do, you must tell us. And also my antecedent behavior one talks about no child left behind, persistently dangerous, how that works. All these things work together. Due process, did you give the kid a chance to give his statements? Did you get witnesses? All those kinds of things. But you've hit on most of those things tonight. But if you want to, there's some really good things under tonight's lesson. If you click on, November the 2nd, you can kind of work through those at your own pace. There's some pretty good stuff there. But we won't bother to sit and read them to you. Now, the last thing this evening. Dr. Steve, what did we decide about our time in November, our face-to-face time in Charlotte? Did we decide that we were going to just be online?
I think we decided that we would let them decide, but we still have the protocols in place in Charlotte.
That is correct. We were waiting on November 1st. They did not change. They were renewed. And
so we want this to be what you want it to be as a group. Dale and I mean, we kind of live for the fun we have when we're able to mingle, and we haven't been able to mingle. And so for that, we're kind of in the dumps. With that, we'll do what you want to do as a group. but I guess there's a part of me that would say, I don't know that you would get an enormous amount more out of coming to Charlotte than we can do it this way with the protocols that are in place in Charlotte. So with that, but Dale and I are old and retired, so it's, you know, and both of us can get to Charlotte campus in about 20 minutes. So
Yeah, we live there.
we're wide open. So what do y'all want to do?
I saw Leah said that I know there's a lot of cases in schools, a lot of quarantine, a lot of students. Now, remember, if we go to Charlotte, we all have to wear a mask all day, and we have to stay apart. Our problem is trying to stay apart. If we don't get the big room, it gets really hard for everybody to be in the same place together. We kind of have to move out into a more open space, which is really difficult, kind of out in the open area. The room downstairs, I was there last week to check on the room downstairs, is not complete. So, you know, it's not a good situation if we go. It's not like it used to be where we got in the room and we could eat. We can't bring food. We can't do those kinds of things because of all the stuff that's in place. You know, we could have refreshments, but we really can't bring food. We got to wear a mask, and we can't get it. You know, we've got all the stuff that's a negative. So, but we'd love to come. I mean, because we're 20 minutes away. He's on one side, and he's on the west side, and I'm on the north side. And it's a quick trip for us, and we love to go. But it you know, the risk.
Well, since
there's
not going to be food. Charleston is quite a long drive. I'm just going to say that. And I'm going to text Dr. Laws this coming weekend and see if I can bump into him in Charleston.
We'll be there Monday next week.
Now, I said there'd be no food as the official, but now, you know, we're going to bring stuff, although we're not allowed to. But we're going to anyway. But, well, you know, what are they going to do? Shoot us? But no, we officially have to follow all protocols. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. That we will social distance, we will wear a mask, and we won't bring food. Now that none of those probably won't happen, is, you know, immaterial. But I think we'll just unless somebody is just you know, has got to be there, we'll just go ahead and make the command decision. Now we'll be online for our last weekend. I hate it, but we were hoping they were revisiting the restrictions on November 1st. I'm a Mecklenburg County resident, and so they revisit that they did not lift the restrictions, and the numbers have not gone down this week nor last week. Unfortunately, the numbers are still going up, and so it would have been fun. I agree. We probably wouldn't have got many lessons done, but we've told a lot of stories and had a lot of laughs.
Lots more stories. I do think we'd laugh more.
Yeah.
Dale and I talked. I just, you know, you folks have so much on your plate. If you're disappointed, then I don't think you're as disappointed as he and I are.
No.
And you can talk us out of this, but I just don't think it's smart for what all you've got to face. And it'll be the weekend before Thanksgiving, and I know that the Sunday is a rather lengthy video that we've been watching, whether we're face to face or Zooming. We do think we can have a great dialogue with that. Dale and I talk even through the Zoom. We'll make the best of it, and I hope you're okay. I hope you're not too disappointed. And some of you may, as soon as you sign off, say, "Great news, we don't have to go to Charlotte." Third week in November.
Yeah.
And we would understand that too, with all that you are battling. And maybe even if you weren't battling anything, we may understand it from your perspective. But from our selfish perspective, we have a great time mingling. So
We do.
so we'll just plan to finish the Tuesday night Zooms and then have the weekend of the 20th and 21st as a Zoom as well. And you'll be done then.
Yeah.
A couple of you still owe me a little bit on the app, so don't forget. Try to keep up but I think 8 of you are done. 2 of you owe me a little bit. So try to get those in as soon as you can, just for your own good. And I guess that's all I've got, Dave.
All right, just work on your OMA. So now we're
I wanted to also ask, I watched the video from last year or last semester, and what do we need to be applying for, or what do I need to be applying for something as far as graduating from this program?
Yep, you gotta apply for graduation. They won't charge you. They'll put a late fee on, they'll take it off. Yeah, you gotta apply for graduation. Let me remind everybody, I had the Legacy Town Hall last week. Y'all were invited, but you probably didn't come. Yes, I did. I turned in y'all all today on the completer list. Actually, that was due to that came out today. So you must go to the website to Gardner Webb and apply for graduation. Now they will charge you $75 for this one, but that includes your certificate, all the things that'll have to be done for back office for licensure. And then you'll have to go and apply separately for licensure when the letter comes out on applying for licensure from Wendy Turbyfield, the licensure officer. She will send out an email that says, this is what you do to apply for license. But right now, you just need to apply for graduation. And even though you technically don't graduate, you need to apply so you can complete this program.
Okay.
That's a good question. I did the completer list today. And so now you are welcome to come to the reception after commencement. I don't think any of you are going to commence this time in the EDCI program, but if you want to come to, so you're not invited to the 9 o'clock ceremony on Saturday, December the 11th. You are invited to the 11:15 ceremony that will be held for the College of Education. Right now, it looks like it's going to be over next door in Omax Gardner over that way. But we don't, that's not for sure yet, but that's what they've got reserved. We'll do a reception where doctorals are recognized again. They'll get hooded at the 9 o'clock ceremony. We'll recognize them. Masters will get hooded. We're off cycle for masters and MELS. But you folks, you can come in your church clothes and be recognized. If you want to drive all the way to Bowling Springs, it's just going to be a few minutes. It's just a reception. You know, it's not going to be at Tucker like it used to be where everybody went, but we will be there. And so we'll be in our regalia. We'll be shaking hands and kissing babies, the usual that we do. We'll be there doing that. So that's on Saturday, December the 11th. Time is 11:15 for the reception. But you do need to apply for graduation. There is a $75 fee that includes your actual certificate from Johnston's, plus all the back office stuff that nobody will charge you anything for, and they'll do all your transcript work and you fill out all your forms and do all that for you. And then you'll pay your small fee to your state and you'll get your license. So Stacy says it's just 10 minutes for her. She might show up. Well, that'd be great. We'll be there. I'll have my gown on. Let's see. I got me a new hat. So I'm ready to go.
Can y'all imagine how big that head is?
That's what I said. And I've got my robe back here. Omar's crowd had to work overtime to make me a robe.
Omar the tent maker had to really get some extra material for that one.
Kind of like the fellow I knew one time drove by the Miller Brewing Company up in Detroit. One fellow said to him, said, I told you as much as you drank that you couldn't put them out of business. He said, no, but I got them working the third shift. So Armall's crowd had to work the third shift, but they've made me I've got a robe that's big enough to fit me, believe it or not. Got me a new hat. I'm ready to go. So we're excited. It's been a while since we've had an in-person ceremony. How long has it been? Since December of 2019, I guess. Been 2 years for us. So we're excited to do that. And we'll matriculate in, you know, act like big shots for the day. But we'd love to see you all if you'd like to come. Again, we'll have, I think we're meeting tomorrow. We should have more information, but right now, our reception is in Omax Gardner, the building right next to Craig Hall, but that may change. But we'd love to see you if you could come. You can see the EDCI people. They'll all be there. I don't know how many of the adjuncts will be coming.
Is anybody graduating with EDCI this semester? Nobody in this group?
No, I looked at the graduation list. None of these folks are on
Okay,
it. So
that's a good one, Leah. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
but they,
Give us till May. We'll be in the May group.
they'll be in the
Okay.
May group, but now we'll,
All right.
Lord willing,
Well,
we'll be here in May. So
Yeah, Dale and I will hopefully still be around too. So we will look forward to celebrating with you. On the
So
May.
if you can't come December the 11th, we understand it's just a reception, but we certainly hope that when you all graduate this spring that you will come, because we make a big deal out of that. They'll hood you. Well, you know, we love to see all of you there. Generally, our folks just come to that, but we'd love to see everybody come. We're so excited about being able to do a ceremony again.
Yeah.
And again, we hate that if they had lifted those restrictions, we'd be in Charlotte in 2 weeks. I can tell you right now, but since they didn't.
Yeah, we would have hoped that y'all would have looked forward to coming to Charlotte at least a little bit, because
Yeah.
we were looking forward to meeting you.
Yeah. All right. We get done early again. I can't believe it. It's a miracle, just like the water stain of the baby Jesus on the wall. It's a miracle. So we'll see y'all next week for our last Tuesday night session. Everybody be careful and behave yourselves. We'll see you then. Good night.
Hey, everybody.
There was not one Jones sausage reference. I am hurt tonight.
But I was late, Mary, and I'm full of shrimp, so I couldn't think about sausage.
He's full of something, but it's not shrimp, I'm afraid.
Oh.